Today, we are talking about foreclosure and bankruptcy options with attorney Alicia Wilson. So today I have our attorney, real estate attorney, Alicia Wilson, with me. And so I thought it was definitely fitting right now. There's a lot of unguided information that's being put out there. So I want to answer some of those questions. So please introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Wilson. As Andrea said, I'm a real estate and a bankruptcy attorney. I work for myself. I have a law firm, the Law Office of Alicia Wilson, where I service everyday people. I service people in bankruptcy, so those who have debt issues and are seeking debt relief. I help them to file bankruptcy. I also service real estate clients in landlord-tenant issues, property ownership issues, issues surrounding buying property, and litigation that results from owning property. So I do a plethora of legal services, and they all relate to bankruptcy and real estate.
Okay. So I have a list of questions here, but if any of you have any additional questions, please type them in the chat and we'll go through them as we're going through here. So I guess we'll start on the bankruptcy side first. Mm-hmm. Before the virus hit, there may have been people who had already been thinking about filing bankruptcy, and now they may be without a job and struggling to pay bills. And by the time we get to the end of this, may have a need to file bankruptcy. Is there a dollar amount that a person should be in debt before they consider filing bankruptcy?
So there is no hard line. It depends a lot on how much income you make and how many assets you have. So I like to say the threshold is if you have debts that are equal to 40% or more of your income, then you should think about filing bankruptcy, because the standard threshold is really to be around 30% with your bills. But if you're inching up with 40% and more of the income that you make, that is a good place to start thinking about bankruptcy.
Okay. So like if I talk to my mom or my grandmother about bankruptcy, it was kind of like a negative thing. No, you don't want to file bankruptcy. Is that still the same today, or do people just kind of treat it like it's just what we do?
Yeah, this is really a myth that I fight against very, very often. For some reason in our community, we feel like it's like the world is ending if you have to file bankruptcy. Shame on you if you have to go and file that petition. But my argument is just the opposite, right? I think the federal law exists for a reason, right? The Constitution was created. They created an entire bankruptcy court so that people could have the right to have debt relief, because everybody falls on hard times. Everybody needs to have the opportunity to hit the refresh button. So it shouldn't feel like a bad thing. In fact, I try to post things to make this point. And if you go on my timeline, I made a post a couple of weeks ago where a client of mine, she has Credit Karma and she monitors her credit very regularly. And as soon as we got her bankruptcy discharge, her credit score increased 233 points, Andrea. So in my opinion, that's a good thing. Before we filed bankruptcy, you should have seen she was so stressed out. She was so worried about, how am I going to pay all these bills? How am I going to make sure that at the end of the month, I'm not in the negative and everyone's in the negative? And so when we filed bankruptcy for her, it took us about 3 or 4 months to get her discharge. Like I said, her credit score went up 233 points and she went from $200,000 in debt to zero.
Oh my goodness.
That's enough.
So can you tell a little bit? I know people probably either mainly file Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Can you explain a little bit of what the difference is between the two?
Sure, yeah. So you have 3 chapters. You have 7, 13, and 11. We don't typically hear about 11 because that's related to businesses that need to file bankruptcy, but Chapter 7 and 13, those are related to consumers or individuals who need to file. So Chapter 7 is really where you're going to wipe out all of your debt. You're going to wipe out everything you own, except what you can, get in under an exemption, but you're going to wipe out all of the debt. Whereas Chapter 13, you're basically saying, I don't want to wipe out my debt, but I want to pay it. And so it will take, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever fits your situation, to pay off that debt. And we create a plan where you pay an amount every single month until your plan is completely paid off. So Chapter 13 is kind of like restructuring, reorganizing your debt, whereas Chapter 13 is like you're completely overwhelmed by the debt and you just need to get rid of it.
Okay. So would you say someone who cannot pay their mortgage right now, should they consider bankruptcy, or should they kind of wait until we get through this virus situation to see where things kind of land?
Yeah. So someone who's having trouble with their mortgage right now, you don't have to jump immediately to bankruptcy. You do have some really good opportunity based on this law that the president just passed. It's called the CARES Act. And basically he's saying, if you have a mortgage and you fell behind your mortgage, they have issued what's called a moratorium. And that means that your federal servicer cannot issue foreclosure against you while this moratorium is in existence. It lasts for 180 days. It was enacted March 27th this year. And it will go for 180 days where the banks cannot file foreclosure against you if you have a federally backed mortgage. So if you want to get in touch with your lender, let them know that you've had hard times. They can give you two options. You have the right to get a forbearance under this CARES Act. And that basically means that you won't have any payments due. They can't charge you extra fees, interest, penalties. They can't charge any of that under this moratorium if you just call them and ask for the forbearance. You will need to submit an affidavit or some form of testimony to them saying that, yes, I fell upon hard times and I can't afford to pay. And literally once you submit that, your forbearance will be issued. So there is some protection under this CARES Act where people might be able to sort of wade the water and try and get through this tough time and not immediately file bankruptcy.
Okay. Now, how often can you file bankruptcy?
So there is a waiting period. You can only file once every 8 years if you're in Chapter 7. It's a little different if you're in Chapter 13. You can do it every 4 to 6 years. But if you've already filed in the last 8 years, then unfortunately you can't file. And hopefully you would be able to take care of some of the rights you have under the CARES Act.
Okay. Okay. And then how long does the process normally take to file bankruptcy?
So it varies. It depends, number one, on how many assets you have. It depends on if you're trying to reaffirm any of your debts, which means you're trying to keep some of the assets that you have and not surrender them to your creditor. But generally speaking, I normally tell people you want to give it between 3 and 6 months. It's a very labor-intensive process. And so you have to submit lots of paperwork and lots of documents. And so it really depends on how quickly people can work through that process. But generally speaking, around 3 to 6 months will get you through the process.
So what if it's a husband and wife? And so the wife wants to file bankruptcy. Does the husband's income or debt play a part in that, or could they potentially go after, the spouse income when you're filing bankruptcy?
Yeah, so married couples, they have an option to do it one of two ways. You can file jointly, and if you file jointly, both of you all will be protected by the discharge that you will receive, which means your creditors cannot come after you or your wife. Or your husband, whatever your spouse is. But if you decide not to file together, the spouse that does not file, they will be liable for the debts if they signed for them. So if you haven't signed for them, you have no liability just because of this, just for the sake of the marriage. But if you have joint debt and only one spouse files bankruptcy, the other spouse will still be on the hook. So I typically advise people to go ahead and file together if you have joint debt. If you don't have joint debt, then it's fine. You can file separately. Uh-oh, did I lose you, Andrea? Can you hear me? Andrea. Technology is failing us. Hey, Andrea. I don't know what to do. Hey, anybody there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I'm sorry. I have, I guess, a bad connection or something, so I went out. So
Good. Okay. Happy you're
huh?
I said I'm happy you're back.
All right, so we know how long the process takes. We know about for married couples. So if someone wanted to file bankruptcy now while we're in quarantine, is that something that they could start the process on, or should they just kind of wait this out?
Yeah, absolutely. We can start the process. For me in particular, my firm is fully virtual. So I can meet with them online just as we're doing. We can exchange documents electronically. I can get signatures electronically. In fact, the bankruptcy court here in Cleveland just issued an order that no longer requires wet signatures, which means we don't have to meet in person to get signatures on the paperwork. So we can do it all virtual so that we can maintain our social distance, but still tend to the business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to start talking about landlords right now. There's a lot of landlords who are stressing out because maybe some of the renters or their tenants, maybe they are unemployed right now and can't pay it. But then there is another group of folks who probably can pay it, but because this order was in place, so we hear, they may have just opted to not pay their landlord. Is there anything that a landlord, well, first let me ask this. I just want to confirm that an order has been placed to stop any potential evictions from happening right now.
Yes. So the CARES Act that we just spoke of did issue a moratorium for all properties that are federally funded. So if the landlord has any Section 8 or LIHTC or anything that has anything to do with federal funding, veteran housing, things of that nature, they can't file an eviction. On top of that, locally, I know in particular the Cleveland Municipal Housing Court has made the same order where they're not accepting any evictions. That is difficult for landlords. However, once this order is lifted, they will be able to file for the eviction and they will be able to receive their property back and get the tenants out. And so it's only going to last for, the federal one lasts for, I think, 120 days. The local ones are going to be over by the beginning of May. And so that will be lifted at that time. And unfortunately, you know, they kind of have to eat those losses until this all pans out. But some people think that, you know, I can just not pay my rent and I'll be fine. And no, that's not the case. You still can get evicted, so pay your rent.
Right. Thank you. So if there is a landlord and you know that your tenant is still working or has a means to pay the rent, is there anything that a landlord can do right now?
I wish there was. You know, I tell people document everything. You know, document it so that when you do go to court, you can make the case that, hey, they were just, you know, not paying because they just chose not to. Unfortunately, because many of the courts are shut down, many of the courts are not even accepting eviction petitions. There's not much they can do. But once the courts open back up, you need to be ready, have all of your documents in order, and be ready to proceed with that eviction so that you can get it done efficiently and quickly.
Okay, so a landlord could already file the, like they could post their 3-day notice. they could start the procedure, but when they turn it over to you as the attorney, you would just not be able to file it with the court until, I don't know, 120 days out or whatever, 90 days out.
Yeah, so it depends. So with the CARES Act and this moratorium against evictions that they have issued, if it's related to any federal funding, you can't issue the 30-day notice. So be careful, because if you try to issue the 30-day notice and then you file your petition, they're going to kick it out because they're going to say that notice was invalid. But if you don't have any federally backed housing units, and you're just in everyday lease contracts with your tenants, you can't issue those. And by the time the courts open back up, you'll be ready to file.
So everyone, just so we're clear on that, basically, if you're getting any type of housing vouchers or anything like that, then you're pretty much stuck right now. You cannot file, which you should. If you are receiving vouchers, you should still be receiving your direct deposits as normal. At least the like if it's CMHA here, at least they should be paying their portion of it. But if it's a self-paying, she said that you can go ahead and start the process and get it started.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that you said that it's about documentation. I think that that's really important. And just the landlord communicating with their tenant as well and kind of giving them guidance with all of this. Now I want to ask some questions about renters. So again, I just want to kind of reiterate, if you are a renter, if they're a renter and knowing that they put this kind of stop order right now, if you have the money, do you suggest that they just stop paying the rent?
I like to do things the right way, Andrea. I don't like to encourage people to do like underhanded, like crooked, just because you can. You should do pay your rent. Pay your rent. You're obligated to do it. If the Rona never showed up, you was gonna have to pay your rent. So just pay it because you don't want to be on the wrong side of the law. You don't want your landlord to come down and file that eviction as soon as they can, because if you don't pay, there's no defense to an eviction. You will be evicted. I don't care what they're saying about the wrong. You will be evicted once that moratorium is over. So you want to do the right thing. Pay the rent. Don't try to slide under the radar and get away with, not paying. Just go ahead and pay the rent.
Yeah, I think some of the confusion with the rent and with the mortgage, where it's kind of put out there so people just kind of think they just stop paying. And even on the mortgage side of it, you have to communicate with your mortgage company and make those arrangements and get it approved and provide whatever documentation they request. And same thing on the tenant landlord side of it, of communicating with your landlord. I mean, they know, the landlord knows what's going on across the country. They may not like it, but it's a reality, and that they may just have to accept right now. So if there is a tenant that's maybe being harassed by their landlord at this point, is there anything that they can do?
Illegal. The landlord cannot do that. And what I typically tell people who call me with these types of issues is let them know that you spoke with your attorney. Hey, I spoke with my attorney. My attorney has advised me that what you're doing is illegal. And if you continue to do this, then we're going to have to take you to court. And most times the landlord is like, ooh, okay, let me back off. People only do what you allow. And if you show them that you're understanding your rights and that you do not allow, for them to harass you or to do things that are illegal, then they're not going to do it. So definitely communicate with them that you understand what your rights are and you understand what they're doing is wrong. And hopefully that will get them to back off.
Yes, so true. So I do want to just kind of give some information back on the bankruptcy piece of it. If anyone is thinking about buying a home and you file bankruptcy, it is 2 years from the date of discharge that you would be able to buy against. And that's not when you file, that's from the date of discharge. So sometimes people get a little confused, or they're ready to move forward and buy a home because, like you said in your example where her points jumped up 200 points, that may put them in a position where they can buy in terms of their credit score. But because of that 2 year period, Do you know why it's that 2-year period?
It really depends on the lender. Sometimes, the lender will let you give you a loan right out of the gate. Sometimes they'll make you wait 4 years. Sometimes they'll make you wait 2. I mean, there's people who find car lenders, like the day they get discharged, they're rolling off the lot.
No,
So it kind of depends on the lender. The lender wants to be comfortable that you are financially secure and that you're stable. And I think 2-year period, 4-year period, that certainly, gets you out of that danger zone where, they don't know if you're financially stable or, if you fully rebounded from all of the debt that you just discharged. So a lot of times the lenders want to make sure that they've given you some time to breathe and to sort of catch your balance in terms of your finances before you go and jump into a mortgage.
Okay. Someone did have a question. They asked, with the forbearance, how long does it last?
So the forbearance is going to last you 180 days. There's a 180-day period. So if you want to take advantage of it, it's time to do it now. Get in touch with your lenders now before that forbearance runs out. Because after this 180-day period, if you try to get a forbearance on day 179, you may have missed the boat. So now is the time to get in there, and you have the full 180 days that this law is going to allow you to have that forbearance.
Have you heard, or do you know, when they get to that end of that period, what's going to happen at that point? Because, we just were issued here in Ohio another 30-day order, stay home order. Yep. So there may still be, I'm guessing we're just taking one day at a time with all of this. But for those that are worried that they may potentially lose their home, is there anything else you think that they can do?
Yeah. So in addition to the forbearance, where they completely stop your payments, you can also seek a modification, which is something that I help people to work out all the time in lieu of a foreclosure. So a modification is basically, they're going to take a look at your current circumstances, your current income, and say, is there any adjustment that we can make to your payment amount so that it could be a little bit more feasible for you? And they're going to take everything that is defaulted, all of your the payments that you were unable to make, and just tack it on to the back of your mortgage so that you still owe the money. It's not like you're walking away scotch-free. You're still going to owe the money, whether you get a modification or forbearance, but it makes it so that the pressure is not right now to pay or to catch up. It just goes to the back of your loan.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else or any tips that maybe we didn't cover, or my questions that I didn't ask, that you would give to the audience on what they should be doing during this time?
Yeah, during this time, I tell people, take inventory of your finances, take inventory of who you owe, and really be clear about what your debt to income looks like. And again, if you're at that 40% or above threshold, now is the time to start thinking about filing. Another thing that might be a red flag for you is if you're using debt to pay debt, that's a good time to think about, filing bankruptcy. You also want to think about whether the debts that you have are eligible for bankruptcy, because bankruptcy is not going to discharge every debt that you own. So for example, if you owe student loans, you're not going to be able to get that discharged in a bankruptcy. And so that's important to really take inventory of, everything that you owe, and make sure that you're even eligible. And I also tell people, sometimes people are really in this thinking mode, like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I do it? Should I not do it? And they spend so much time thinking and going back and forth about why you should do it. So I like to give people concrete tips or concrete signs that they should look for. If you are, gonna wait, it's gonna hurt you. Not only is it stressful to be under all of this pressure with debt, it's draining. Right? And then you risk being sued. Your creditors can certainly file a lawsuit against you if you haven't paid them, if you're not communicating with them. And then it'll hurt your credit score. Obviously, we know that. It'll certainly hurt your credit score if your debt to income ratio is high and you're just waiting it out and thinking and not moving forward. So I would just say, figure out what action you can take. whether that's going to be a repayment plan, or whether that's going to be going ahead and filing bankruptcy, or whether that's going to be just communicating with your lender or your mortgage holder and letting them know your current circumstance. Because I think a lot of times we like to just wait it out and we like to sort of keep it a secret. But, you know, let people know what you're going through, let people know what you're dealing with, reach out to someone like myself who can help you analyze the situation and understand what your next steps are so that you can move forward in action once this all clears up and not, you know, continue to wait around and drown yourself in the problems at the end of the day.
Okay. Very good. So someone asked, could you hold up your business card on the camera? So I'm not sure if they will be able to see it, but if you also want to tell them how that they can get in touch with you, that would be great. You can hold it up too.
I don't even know if you're going to be able to see it, but I won't do that. I have a digital card. I will certainly post the digital card in the comments of this talk. But if you're looking to get in touch with me, my firm is The People's Esquire. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. If that doesn't work, you can go to my website. My website is www.attorneyawilson.com, or you can send me an email. My email is justice@attorneyawilson.com.
Wonderful. So thank you all for watching.
Yeah.
So all week long, I'm going to be hosting a live series here with folks that help us get through this quarantine period. So if you're available, please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. I will have Chef Stacy Stuttermeyer. She's going to be on. She's going to share with us some tips on things you can do. Everyone's saying their kids are eating them out of a house and a home. How can we keep them healthy? I know I've been eating lots of chips and snacks and everything else since I've been in the house more. And I think I really realized what it was the other day is that now my cupboards are stocked. The refrigerator is stocked. So I have all of these options every time I go there.
Uh-huh.
So she's going to give us some tips tomorrow on how to deal with that. And then all week long, so stay on. If you're not following the Brickhouse Realty page, make sure you follow so you can see who we have coming on. If you aren't following Alicia, please make sure you follow her, touch base with her. She does answer DMs.
Yes, you can slide in my DMs if you got problems.
So she's available to help you through this period as well. So thank you for joining me as well, Alicia, and everyone.